the Marquis's noble daughter, fell in love with a humble commoner knight. She thought the two of them would finally find happiness together. But only 2 years into their marriage, her husband led the Revolutionary Army in a bloody massacre of his wife's family. Even so, Annette still believed that her husband deeply loved her. It was not until the moment she received that letter that she finally realized that this seemingly sweet, fated encounter had actually been a carefully laid trap by her husband for the sake of revenge. After suffering this betrayal, Annette asked her husband for a divorce, but Heiner firmly refused. Seeing her husband's figure bathed in the glow of the sunset, Annette finally realized that this man's revenge had only just begun. Annette was born into a noble family in the kingdom of Padania. Her father, Marquis Dietrich, was the king's nephew, and also a general in the armed forces of the Kingdom of Padania. Heiner, meanwhile, served as a commander under her father. In the season when the roses were in bloom, she met Heiner as if by fate. After being in love for 2 years, the two finally entered into marriage. However, the happy days did not last long. This happiness soon came to an end, and the Kingdom of Padania was overthrown by the Revolutionary Army. Her father was killed by the revolutionaries, and her mother took her own life in hatred. And the commander-in-chief of the Revolutionary Army was none other than Annette's husband, Heiner. Even so, Annette still believed in her husband, but Heiner seemed to have become a completely different person. Annette could never bring herself to believe that her husband had approached her intentionally from the very beginning. Swept along by the tide of the times, Annette fell from a noble lady to the daughter of a war criminal. Merely being alive was enough to provoke the anger of countless people. She did not understand politics, but she also knew that she could no longer remain uninvolved. Every day, she lived like a walking corpse. At such a desperate and powerless time, Annette desperately wished that her husband would stand by her side. Yet after receiving that letter, she finally learned the answer. Her husband had never loved her from the very beginning. It was only her own wishful thinking that had mistaken past coincidences for destined fate. Annette truly felt that the version of herself who had tried so hard to mend their relationship was unbelievably foolish. After hearing his wife say this, Heiner made no explanation at all and even let out a cold laugh. From beginning to end, he had always deeply hated Marquis Dietrich and the royal family, and of course, that included Annette as well. The truth was exactly as Annette had said. His approach to her had only been one part of his plan. 2 years earlier, a report claiming that the royal family had secretly trained spies had caused a huge uproar. Heiner was one of the spies trained by Marquis Dietrich, and he was the only one who survived after earning merit in service. Later, Marquis Dietrich kept him by his side, and it was then that Heiner first met Annette. He still remembered that day. Annette wore a long dress and jewels, her smile radiant. She said she had come to mourn the warriors who had sacrificed themselves for the country, but in truth her actions looked more like charity than mourning. Annette's heart gradually grew cold, so everything Heiner had done to her had been for revenge. She had not even known anything, and yet had thrown herself into loving him without hesitation. So Annette resolutely asked Heiner for a divorce, but he did not agree. Annette could not understand it. Now that the kingdom had already perished and her parents were both dead, what meaning was there in keeping her behind? Everything she had now was only brought by the identity of being Heiner Waldemar's wife. Now that you have completed your revenge, why are you still unwilling to let me go? No sooner had the words left her mouth than Heiner stood up in furious rage. He gripped Annette's chin tightly and demanded harshly, "Do you still intend to leave this place and find happiness on your own? If not, then it's simple. Since you will never become happy again, stay by my side and spend your whole life enjoying misery." Seeing Heiner's figure wrapped in the evening glow, Annette realized that this man's revenge had only just begun. The next day, reports about Annette made the newspaper headlines. The public argued that they had no obligation to continue caring for the remnants of the Kingdom of Padania. Feeling somewhat suffocated, Annette decided to go outside for a walk and get some air. On the way, she ran into Colonel Eugen, one of Heiner's subordinates. Just as the two were about to pass each other, Eugen suddenly spoke. "The commander-in-chief is going to discuss marriage with Annalie. She is an outstanding woman who fought alongside him and a contributor to victory, and she enjoys great public support. Don't you think, madam, that she is a much more suitable match by the commander's side?" Hearing this, Annette merely nodded in agreement. Everyone was waiting to see her downfall. Every day, the newspapers carried reports about purging the remnants of the old regime, and countless letters of accusation and threats were delivered to the estate. To Annette, being by Heiner's side was like hell. "So I already brought up divorce to him yesterday, but he did not agree. Perhaps he simply does not want to lose sight of my misery. If the colonel can help persuade Heiner, I would be grateful to you." As she said this, Annette felt as though her heart were being viciously twisted. Everyone hated her. So on what grounds had she ever believed that he would still love her? That evening, Heiner came to Annette's room to explain. "As for the marriage proposal mentioned during the day, I had originally planned to refuse it in private, but I did not expect it to be reported anyway. So don't expect to divorce me, and don't think about leaving this place either." Annette was somewhat confused. If he hated her so much, Why was he absolutely unwilling to divorce her? Everyone says that it is only because of the commander that I am able to live like this. They also say that I am the stain on your life and must be erased. If the commander refuses to divorce me, is it because you want to keep me by your side and watch me slowly wither away? Do you hate me so much that you do not even care about your own reputation? Or is it that you are worried I have hidden property somewhere else? You should know very well that I have already lost everything and have nowhere to go. At those words, Heiner's expression instantly darkened. Since you want a divorce so badly, I can all the less grant your wish. At some point, the way he looked at her had become so dark. Back then, his eyes had clearly carried a smile, and even his voice had been so gentle. So all those versions of him that she had loved had never been real. Seeing Annette's despairing expression, Heiner asked coldly, "Is it because you learned that I betrayed you that you have started to resent me?" "No, I do not hate you. I do not hate anyone. Even if everyone in the world resents me, I will not hate anyone because I have no right to. If everyone in the newspapers thinks that the remnants of the kingdom must be eliminated, then let it be done. I may not understand politics, but I do understand morality, and I also know why people wanted to overthrow the kingdom and establish a new regime. Even if I cannot say I truly understand it, I agree with them." Heiner found it hard to believe what his wife was saying. "In any case, whatever the outcome, I do not care. As long as you divorce me, even if I fall into complete ruin in the end, I do not want to end my life as your wife, because that is the only shred of self-respect I have left." Annette brought up divorce again and again, and Heiner seized her shoulders emotionally. "Just how easily have you lived, madam, that you can speak of divorce so lightly? From now on and forever, you will be my wife. Freedom, happiness, whatever it is, do not even think about them again. All you need to do is stay under my watch, endure every misery, and bear the burden of guilt." Before leaving, Heiner demanded that Annette accompany him to a banquet. When he heard Annette refuse, Heiner let out a helpless sigh. "If you dare continue to defy me like this, I may have you locked away in a mental hospital for the rest of your life. If you do not want that to happen, then do as I say." Thinking about it carefully, Heiner had always been this kind of person from the start. But Annette had deceived herself again and again. Relying on those moments when they had once loved each other, she kept brainwashing herself, telling herself that all of this was only temporary, that it was only because he had now lost everything that he temporarily no longer loved her. "Answer me quickly, madam." That icy gaze instantly dragged Annette back to reality, and she finally understood that this love, which had come from the beginning with an ulterior motive, was not love at all. Heiner's cold words were like shards of glass, piercing deeply into Annette's mind. As usual, she took her sleeping pills. Each time she swallowed one pill, she would put 2 others into the medicine box. Watching the medicine box grow heavier little by little, Annette would always feel a strange sense of reassurance. The next day, Annette woke up very early because of a headache. She explained her symptoms to the doctor, but as usual, he mechanically prescribed her a sleeping draft. He even said that migraines were just a common illness and there was no need to make a fuss. Annette frowned and continued describing her condition. However, the doctor impatiently packed up his medicine box. Even over the slightest little discomfort, Madam always reacts far too sensitively. "I am a doctor assigned to the official residence, not your personal physician." As soon as he said that, the maids all burst into laughter. Helpless, Annette thanked the doctor and bid him farewell. She knew that once he had said such things, no matter how much she pressed him, there would be no result. Soon, the day of the banquet arrived. Heiner and Annette entered the venue arm in arm. The moment they entered, the host of the banquet warmly stepped forward to greet Heiner, but he completely ignored Annette, who had arrived with him. She stood there like a vase at the side, without saying a word, because no one there greeted her at all. In the past, these people would certainly have scrambled to bow to her first. But no matter what, Heiner seemed utterly unconcerned with her situation, and yet he still wanted Annette to fulfill her duty as his wife and stubbornly brought her to this banquet. Now it seemed that his purpose could not be simpler. He merely wanted Annette, who rarely left the house, to understand her own misery even more clearly. After all, at a banquet like this, people's malice toward her would become even more direct. At this time, Heiner was still exchanging pleasantries with the people at the banquet, and someone even openly brought up his possible marriage to Miss Annalie. While saying that he already had a wife, Heiner cast his gaze toward Annette. In the next second, his expression suddenly darkened. At that moment, Annette was drinking a cocktail. The spicy liquid slid down her throat as she tried to use it to ignore Heiner's conversation with those people. Yet just as she was about to drink the third glass, a large hand gently wrapped around her shoulder and stopped her. Suddenly, a voice coming from the stage drew both of their attention. It turned out that Felix, Pedania's famous pianist, would be performing there. He had once been the idol Annette admired most. Even though she had not played the piano in 3 years, Annette still remembered the melody of that piece. Annette looked at him quietly. Unlike the excitement and joy she had once felt, now her chest held nothing but sorrow and desolation. Once, Felix's performances had nurtured Annette's dreams, and she too had wanted to become a pianist like him. But the things she had once wanted to say, Annette could no longer utter a single word of now. In the past, through her father's connections, she had met Felix several times, and had even received his autograph and encouragement. But now, everything was different from back then. Felix was a genius pianist of common birth, while she had already fallen into a despised remnant of the old kingdom. Perhaps even Felix had not necessarily thought highly of her back then, and simply had not shown it out of helplessness. Just as Annette was filled with sorrow, a voice suddenly rang out from the crowd. Doesn't Mrs. Waldemar also play the piano? If possible, could you play a piece for us? This question, which sounded gentle on the surface, was in fact razor sharp. Before Annette could answer, a woman pushed her onto the stage. Annette instinctively glanced at Heiner, wanting to ask him for help, but he merely stood there indifferently. Annette also felt ridiculous. At a time like this, she was still foolishly hoping that he would stop all of this. Annette lowered her gaze back to the piano, but before she could even touch the keys, she had already begun trembling uncontrollably. Annette shut her eyes in despair. The hall was so silent it was suffocating, and the whispers around her lashed against her like whips. Suddenly, a chill instantly enveloped Annette's whole body. She remembered the moment 2 years earlier when her father had told her to run for her life. With the sound of a gunshot, Annette watched her father die with her own eyes. From the time she had just learned how to walk, Annette had already begun learning to play. Although she knew what sound every key would make, ever since her father's death, she had never again managed to play an entire piece from beginning to end. Along with that, the honors she had once possessed had also all been called into question, and people were convinced that Annette's achievements had all come from connections and money. Even Annette herself had begun doubting her own talent. She had thought that as time passed, things would gradually improve, but when she sat before the piano again, she realized that she truly had nothing left. When Heiner returned to the residence, the butler informed him that Annette had gone on a hunger strike. Without even having time to change his clothes, Heiner went straight to his wife's room. "You stayed in your room embroidering all day and did not even eat?" Annette did not even want to look at him. "Did you come here to gloat?" At that moment, Heiner noticed the prescription on the table. Ignoring Annette's wishes, he immediately began rummaging through drawers and cabinets. He picked up the pillbox and questioned Annette, "What is this?" After hesitating for a moment, Annette said, "They are just medicine. I did not finish taking them, so I saved them." Heiner did not believe his wife's words. "I will have someone bring food. These medicines have been sitting too long, so I am taking them away." Annette had just been about to cry out in protest, but she suddenly realized that she had no right to argue at all. "I do not want to eat." Heiner paid no attention to what she said and simply continued arranging the documents on the table. "If you want to die, then please choose a more graceful way to do it. After all, you are Lady Rosenberg's princess." Heiner's sarcasm made Annette feel deeply humiliated. At that moment, the meal was brought in. "Eat." Suddenly, Annette became emotional. "What does it have to do with you whether I eat or not?" Heiner had not expected such a strong reaction from her either. "That does not sound like something you would usually say. Do you know me that well? Then again, I suppose you must. Otherwise, how could you have deceived me to this extent?" "But Heiner, things are different now. I am no longer your lover. Nor am I Rosenberg's princess. Now I am nothing." Heiner looked at her expressionlessly. Annette was right. Her splendid background, in the present day, was nothing more than a scrap of waste paper, and the people who had once loved her were long dead. She was clearly nothing anymore, so why was she still as noble and beautiful as she had been the first time he met her? It even involuntarily reminded him of the inferiority and pain of his own childhood. "Eat now. Do not force me to do it myself." Under Heiner's urging, Annette reluctantly began to eat. Suddenly, his eyes fell on Annette's embroidery. The ugly pattern made him frown involuntarily. Once, Annette had given him several handkerchiefs embroidered by her own hand. Back then, her embroidery had been exquisite and beautiful, but now this piece could barely even be called anything more than a tangled mess of thread. Just then, Annette suddenly spoke. "I want to go somewhere far away by myself for a walk, but I know you will not agree. Come to think of it, when exactly did it start that I needed your permission before doing anything?" Heiner gave no answer at all. As he prepared to leave, he issued another warning to Annette. "If I find out that you did not eat, I will regard it as an eating disorder and send you to a mental hospital." With that, he slammed the door shut, leaving only Annette alone in the room, murmuring softly in disappointment. After Heiner returned to his room, he immediately called the doctor. After learning that his wife had been taking sleeping pills, he stared at the pillbox in silence. Hoarding sleeping pills was usually the act of someone seeking death, but in his eyes, Annette did not have that kind of courage at all. Then, he casually threw the pills into the trash. Perhaps she was only trying to attract attention in this way. She simply did not understand what real despair and misfortune were. She trembled in fear merely because of other people's gossip and something as trivial as never being able to play the piano again. She had never tasted beatings, torture, or hunger. Compared with Heiner's painful life, Annette was like a flower raised in pampered comfort. So he hoped that Annette would be as unhappy as he was. Since his life was so long and dark, Annette should be the same. When the day came that her faith completely collapsed, the only person still willing to remain by her side would be himself. The next day, Annette sat alone in the courtyard resting. At some point, her body had already become far weaker than before. She had once tried to use a child to mend the relationship between herself and Heiner. Although after each time, they never once lay in each other's arms until dawn. Although she was always left alone in a cold and empty room, she still fantasized that Heiner could return to the way he used to be. She did not understand why Heiner was doing this. Could it be only to make her keep clinging to such hollow hope and continue living? For a moment, Annette had the thought of simply dying like this. Suddenly, she heard someone calling her. The person who came was none other than Miss Annalie, who had not long ago discussed marriage with Heiner. "Do you have time right now? I would like to speak with you." After receiving Annette's consent, Annalie sat down. "In truth, I have only seen Madam in the newspapers, and I have always been curious about what kind of person you would be. How is life in the residence? I heard you hardly ever go out." Annette said that she only wanted to live quietly in peace. "As for you, I doubt you truly care about me either. If you have something to say, just say it." After hesitating for a while, Annalie finally spoke. "The truth is, I do not like you, madam. Whenever I think of what Marquis Dietrich did and everything you once enjoyed, I grind my teeth in hatred. At the same time, I also believe that you are not suited to remain by the commander's side." At this, Annette only smiled faintly. "On that matter, you would do better to speak with my husband." Who would have expected that at this moment, Annalie would suddenly drop her pleasant expression from before? "Madam, I am warning you. We can very well force the commander, through the council, to abandon this marriage." Annette did not back down in the slightest and looked directly into Annalie's eyes. "I know as well that you have been using me the whole time in the battle for public opinion. I do not understand why you want to pin all those baseless things onto me. But now, 3 years have already passed, and I will not hate you anymore. As for the marriage you just mentioned, you need not worry. It had already ended long ago." After lunch, a maid came to report that a gentleman wished to see Madame. Just as Annette was feeling puzzled, she heard a name she had not heard in a very long time: Ansgar. He was the second son of a count's family that had once been closely tied to the Rosenbergs. The two had been extremely close since childhood, and Ansgar had even once proposed to Annette. After being rejected by Annette, Ansgar had gone abroad to study. Now, his family too had fallen in the revolution, but fortunately, he had been overseas at the time and escaped that disaster. But public opinion in Pedania was constantly spreading anti-aristocratic sentiment, and Annette, with royal blood in her veins, had naturally become the most typical target. So no matter what Ansgar's purpose was, Annette felt that she could not be of any help. Ansgar said that he had previously sent several letters but had never received a reply, so he had decided to come in person. Annette suddenly realized that it was Heiner who had secretly hidden those letters, so she explained that perhaps she had simply been careless for a moment and failed to notice them. During her conversation with Ansgar, she learned that he was now serving as an ambassador in France, where many nobles had fled after the revolution broke out. He was also fully aware of Annette's situation. Over the years, she had constantly been exploited by public opinion, while her husband remained indifferent to it all. Was there really any need to continue such a marriage? Annette was left speechless for a moment, because all the servants in this room were Heiner's spies. She could only say that divorcing now would still be somewhat difficult for her. Is it because you would have nowhere to go after the divorce? Then come to France with me. Even now, I still care deeply for you. If we marry, you'll be able to obtain French citizenship directly. Ansgar reached out his hand to Annette and waited confidently for her reply. "I will make you happier than you are now." In that instant, Annette remembered what Heiner had said when he proposed to her. In the end, she still retreated. "My husband will never agree." Ansgar was somewhat puzzled. After the divorce, you and he will be strangers, whether he agrees or not. What significance would that have? Suddenly realizing that he had been too hasty, Ansgar became flustered. "Then I'll leave you my contact information first." He awkwardly took out a pen and wrote down his information on a calling card. The Ansgar of the past had still felt somewhat unfamiliar to Annette, but the way he was now was exactly the same as when they were children. At that time, she still understood nothing. After saying goodbye to Ansgar, Annette could not help but begin to think about his true purpose in coming to see her. The moment she connected all the pieces of information, she finally understood everything. So their real purpose was to restore the monarchy. Now, all the forces within Pedania that supported constitutional monarchy had already been completely eliminated by Heiner. He had almost perfectly resolved the chaos and contradictions left behind after the revolution. Precisely because of this, those nobles who had fled to France needed Annette, who possessed royal blood, even more. At the same time, This might also be her last chance to escape from Heiner. That night, Heiner and Annette dined together in the restaurant. Seeing Annette look as though nothing had happened, a trace of displeasure flashed across Heiner's eyes. "I heard Ansgar came to the residence to see you this afternoon. What did you two talk about? What is there to ask? The servants must have already told you everything long ago anyway." But Heiner still insisted. "Even so, I want to hear it from your own mouth. What exactly do you, the person involved, think?" Annette sighed helplessly. "He asked me to divorce you and go to France with him. This was the first time I had seen Ansgar in 4 years. Then, how do I know whether the two of you have been secretly in contact behind my back, just like how you secretly investigated my past? Just because I exchanged contact information with Ansgar, do I have to be interrogated like this?" Annette only felt that Heiner's words were utterly unreasonable, but in the end, she still did not completely vent this humiliation. "In any case, I will not let you be with Ansgar, and it is absolutely impossible for you to leave this place." Heiner's firm and decisive reply made Annette begin to seriously think about the deeper meaning behind all this. Heiner's refusal to divorce her was perhaps simply his way of using the law to bind her, so as to keep those old nobles in check. Although Annette was happy about Ansgar's arrival, she likewise did not want to be used by them as a tool simply because she possessed royal blood. But if that was the case, why were all of Heiner's subordinates so eager for her to get a divorce? Even she herself had always hoped for it. Only the man before her had never once been willing to let her go. The next day, Annette changed into clothes suitable for going out and prepared to leave for a walk. But before she even reached the door, the guard stopped her, saying they had no commander's permission. So now, even going out to pray requires his permission? Seeing that Annette had become angry, the guards finally let her out. The moment she stepped out of the residence, Annette immediately hailed a carriage. A flash of joy, like regained freedom, passed through her eyes. "Please take me to Rochester Station." After boarding the train, Annette found her seat. Everyone around her was holding newspapers, which made Annette uneasy for a moment. She worried that there might once again be reports about her in them. Across from Annette sat an elderly woman. For reasons unknown, ever since Annette boarded the train, the woman had been praying devoutly the whole time. In fact, Annette was also a devout believer, but by now she was already tired of praying for salvation and forgiveness, because no matter how she prayed, suffering and misfortune always clung to her side. Thinking of this, she let out a dejected sigh. Annette's visible unease attracted the elderly woman's attention. After learning that Annette wanted to go to the seaside to clear her mind, the woman asked in confusion why she was not going with her beloved. So Annette told her about the discord between herself and her husband, and that all she wanted now was a divorce. The elderly woman advised Annette to take it more lightly. In her time, divorce was a stain on a woman, but nowadays it was no longer so important. "I once understood that feeling too. Accepting the fact that you are disliked by others is even harder than one imagines. But there was nothing I could do about those people, so as long as you live with the ones who love you, that is enough." Annette nodded in agreement, but inside her heart, a trace of bitterness welled up. She had never asked to be loved by everyone. She had only hoped not to be hated. What was more, the people who loved her were already dead, and only those who hated her remained in this world. So what was she supposed to do? By the time Annette arrived at the seaside, it was already evening. She removed her veil and gazed at the sea before her, dyed red by the glow of the setting sun. Ever since she got married, she had never come to the seaside again. This long absent scenery made her unable to suppress her excitement. Just then, Annette noticed someone painting on the beach. The man explained that he was about to close up his stall, but before leaving, he could paint a portrait of Annette for free. Annette hesitated a little. She worried that if she removed her veil, someone might recognize her. Half jokingly, the stall owner said that if she was not confident about showing her face, it was fine to keep it on. In the end, Annette still took off her hat. Fortunately, the stall owner showed no reaction at all after seeing her. Halfway through the painting, the stall owner told Annette not to keep wearing such a dejected expression. Annette was amused into laughter by his comical and ridiculous expression. After the painting was finished, Annette was extremely satisfied. Her flowing golden hair and brilliant blue eyes looked almost lifelike. To show her gratitude, Annette bought several more paintings from the stall owner. And just as Annette was immersed in this happiness, she did not know that Heiner had followed her all the way there and had also come to the seaside. Annette carefully took off her shoes and stepped into the seawater. She stuffed some trash, like shells and conchas, into her wool sweater. Before she knew it, the sky had grown dark. Annette stood up and gazed into the distance. She suddenly realized that on the other side of the sea lay an unknown and distant world. Unconsciously, step by step, Annette walked into the sea shrouded in night. The seawater gradually submerged her body, but Annette never stopped walking. At that moment, a large hand suddenly grabbed her. That familiar presence made Annette instantly realize who it was. Heiner's deep voice fell from above her head. "Where exactly are you trying to go?" A few hours earlier, Heiner had rushed to the station based on a report from his subordinates. Completely different from the noisy crowd, Annette sat alone on a bench waiting for the train. For some reason, that scene felt especially unfamiliar to him. Judging from what Annette was wearing, it did not seem as though she were trying to escape, and Heiner could not help but feel curious about why she had suddenly gone out. Along the way, he had also overheard the conversation between Annette and the elderly woman. Even if I died, my husband would not care. Heiner believed that Annette's words were not wrong. Even if Annette really died, it seemed it would not have much effect on him. By contrast, the elderly woman's words struck Heiner as laughable instead. Aside from him, Annette now had nothing left. Even if there was no love between them, they would still remain entangled with each other until the end. After that, Heiner followed Annette all the way to the seaside. The moment he saw Annette smile, his heart trembled for some reason. He could no longer clearly remember the last time he had seen this woman smile. As fragments of long-distant memories surged up, Heiner suddenly felt a wave of irritation. He wanted to take Annette back to the residence immediately. He did not want to see this woman look happy, nor would he allow her even a moment of freedom and respite. But for some reason, Annette's smile rendered Heiner incapable of doing anything. After pulling Annette out of the seawater, Heiner ordered her to put on her shoes immediately and take her luggage. At that moment, something sharp cut across the sole of Annette's foot, and Heiner let out a helpless sigh. Then, he forcefully picked Annette up in his arms. Annette cried out in panic. What answered her was Heiner's extremely dark expression. Only then did Annette realize that her attempt to run away had truly angered Heiner. Afterward, the two of them went to a hotel. Even in public, Heiner still did not put Annette down. They rented a room, and Heiner placed Annette into the bathtub. Then he turned and left. The wound on her foot was deeper than Annette had imagined. By the time she came out of the bathroom, Heiner seemed to have prepared in advance and had already taken out the medicine kit. He gestured for Annette to sit on the bed. In Pedania, noble women were not supposed to let others see their bare feet easily, so even though they were husband and wife, Annette still felt a wave of embarrassment. At that moment, Heiner suddenly spoke. "You went so far as to deceive your attendants to come here. Was it because something important happened? Or did you and Ansgar arrange to meet here?" Heiner's angry gaze made Annette flustered for a moment. She turned her head aside and explained that she had only wanted to come see the sea. "It was not just to see the sea, was it? I also saw you walking toward the deeper water. I know that you are afraid of many things that seem trivial to others. But when no one is accompanying you, what worries me most instead is your recklessness. You left your luggage on the beach without even considering whether it might be stolen. Every time I see you like this, I dislike you all the more. The world has already changed. Yet you have not changed at all. You are still just like those nobles of the past, so ignorant of the world that it makes me sick." Heiner's words pierced Annette's heart brutally. She did not know when exactly Heiner had begun to loathe her, perhaps from the very first moment they met. If that was really the case, then when they had once loved each other, what had Heiner really been thinking? "You must think I'm ridiculous, don't you? Facing a woman who disgusts you to the point of nausea, yet still having to pretend to love her deeply. If you really hated me that much, why didn't you tell me directly 3 years ago? I knew nothing, and yet I foolishly loved you for a full 3 years, because at that time, she still believed that one day he would change his heart. But over these past 3 years, her love had long since been shattered again and again. That repeated pain of collapse had already exhausted Annette. No matter how much she persisted, it no longer had any meaning. At that moment, Heiner broke the silence. "Do you still love me now?" Annette could not tell whether those words were sarcasm or mockery. "If I say yes, then that would be too pitiful. My feelings have never had any meaning anyway, and this will never happen again." When Annette came out of the bathroom after finishing her bath, she found that Heiner was still sitting in the room reading the newspaper and could not help asking, "Are you sleeping here tonight too?" Heiner raised his head and glanced at her indifferently. "What if I go to another room? Are you planning to run away again?" Annette sat blankly at the bedside without answering. After the lights were turned off, Annette dried her hair and lay back on the bed. The sound of Heiner turning over documents made it impossible for her to fall asleep. She could not understand why, despite being so busy, he still had to go to such lengths to come after her. Clearly, he loathed her so much, yet he still wanted to control her every moment. After a while, Annette sat up from the bed. Skilled and practiced, she took out sleeping pills. At that moment, Heiner suddenly grabbed her wrist. "Do you take sleeping pills every time you cannot sleep? Do you think this is some kind of good thing?" As he spoke, he forcefully snatched the medicine pouch away. His tone was full of impatience. But the Heiner of the past had never been like this. Even when the two of them quarreled, Heiner would always apologize to her first, then hold her and take the initiative to make peace. Looking back now, that had probably only been his deliberate attempt to cater to her in order to become her father's confidant. Annette clearly knew that those past things had long since lost all meaning, yet she still could not help recalling them. At that moment, a teacup was suddenly held out before her. Annette lifted her head in surprise. "It's chamomile tea. Drink it. It helps with sleep." Then Heiner began rummaging through Annette's satchel. It was stuffed full, almost entirely with various medicines. Heiner asked Annette what all those medicines were. Most of them were sleeping pills and medicine to relieve headaches, but the doctor said it was probably only because I was too sensitive. After hearing this, Heiner turned his head away disdainfully. It seemed that in his view it was the same. At that moment, Heiner found Ansgar's calling card at the bottom of the satchel. Seeing Heiner slip the card into his coat pocket, Annette hesitated before speaking. Does Ansgar in France really have forces that want to restore the kingdom? Hearing this, Heiner's eyes widened instantly. Is that what he told you? Is that why he invited you to join them? Annette explained that it was only her own guess. I just wanted to tell you that I have hidden nothing from you, and I have no intention of leaving with Ansgar. Although Annette tried hard to prove her innocence, Heiner still remained unconcerned. I knew it. He still hasn't given up on you. Didn't you say you had nowhere left to go? Now it seems there is someone willing to take you in. Heiner's sarcasm brought a bitter smile to Annette's face. I thought that all your efforts were meant to make this world a better place. Although Heiner was cruel to her beyond measure, in the eyes of outsiders, it was precisely because of him that the world had become better. Hearing this, however, Heiner suddenly grew angry. I never expected you to help me. I understand Ansgar's thoughts better than you do. If you had not married me, your husband would certainly have been him. So, I will not believe you. Annette repeated what she had just said once again. Whether you believe me or not, I will not leave with Ansgar. The tea in her hand gradually grew cold, and Annette's heart grew cold all over once again. After Annette fell asleep, Heiner reached out, wanting to touch her soft cheek. But very quickly, he felt uncomfortable again, and withdrew his hand. He got up to search his coat pocket for a cigar, only to unexpectedly discover that the pocket of Annette's wool sweater was bulging. When he took the contents out to look, they were all worthless bits of trash. These things almost instinctively made Heiner feel disgusted. He casually threw them into the trash bin. Then, he walked onto the balcony, wanting to get some air. Because of his past experiences, whenever Heiner found himself in a dark and enclosed environment, he would always feel the urge to smoke. But ever since he had gotten involved with Annette, he had given up that habit. Although he often felt that there was no longer any need for him to continue pretending, Annette's existence still touched the most vulnerable part of him again and again. In the end, Heiner still gave up on smoking and turned back into the room. He stared at those things in the trash bin for a long time. Annette said that her feelings had no meaning, but in truth, that was not the case. It was Heiner who deliberately refused to respond to her feelings, causing her to fall into that abyss of despair and pain from the past, just like him. A few days later, Annette sorted out the list of citizen donations and put it into the safe. Then she took a jewelry box out from inside. After that, she took a carriage to a nearby jewelry store. Annette spread all the gemstones out on the counter, hoping the owner could help her dispose of them. Among them, the swan-shaped gemstone left a particularly deep impression on her. This was something Heiner had specially found for her after learning that Annette liked glittering things. Being with Heiner at that time had made it seem as though the whole world were bright and radiant. But now, most of the Rosenberg family's property had already been confiscated or donated, and Annette decided to dispose of these remaining gemstones as well, because she did not want people, after her death, to mention these things only by saying that they had once belonged to Dietrich's daughter. After appraising them, the owner offered Annette a price of £2,300. At that moment, Annette noticed the diamond ring on her hand again. How much is this ring worth? I want to dispose of it as well. The owner immediately said that the ring was worth at least £7,000, but his shop simply could not produce that much money. £2,300 was already quite a considerable sum for ordinary people, but after all, it was the converted price of several high-quality gemstones. Yet a single ring alone was worth £7,000. Even Annette had not expected that. Even back when she was in the Rosenberg family, she had never seen such an expensive gemstone. Could it be that Heiner believed that only a ring this costly could satisfy her? That he thought I was a woman born into privilege, pampered with fine clothes and food, vain and shallow. Annette was just about to leave when she suddenly noticed that someone was staring at her. There was something in that person's gaze that sent a chill down her spine. The next second, accompanied by a gunshot, Annette collapsed. A searing pain spread from her abdomen, and cold sweat kept sliding down from her forehead. She had once heard Heiner say that he had been shot 3 times, but she had never imagined that it would feel like such a nearly tearing kind of pain. Recalling the hatred-filled look in that person's eyes just now, Annette could not understand why he had not simply shot straight through her head. When Heiner learned the news, he panicked in an instant. He abandoned the meeting halfway through and immediately rushed to the hospital where Annette was. He took out an unlit cigar and bit down on it, trying to suppress his emotions. At this moment, he had no time at all to think about the suspect's identity or motive. In his mind, there was only Annette's bright, smiling face. As soon as he arrived at the hospital, Heiner went straight into Annette's ward. Her condition did not seem life-threatening for the time being, but she still had not regained consciousness. At this time, the doctor following behind Heiner spoke cautiously. Madame's wound is not deep and will heal soon. However, regrettably, Madame miscarried because of this incident, and it also left lasting complications. Heiner could hardly believe his ears. When he was told that his wife had already been 11 weeks pregnant, he felt a strong wave of dizziness wash over him. A long time ago, Annette had always wanted a child. Heiner guessed that Annette had probably been clinging to the illusion that as long as they had a child, their relationship could return to how it used to be. But for 4 whole years, there had never been any sign of pregnancy, and the doctors all said that Annette's body was too weak, which was why she had never been able to conceive. But who could have imagined that she really had become pregnant, and that because of this incident, she was left with irreversible aftereffects. After going through a bout of inner struggle, Heiner still forced himself to calm down and accept reality. He ordered the doctor not to let this matter leak out under any circumstances, and continued asking about some symptoms that might occur during pregnancy. When he learned that early pregnancy could cause insomnia and migraines, Heiner's hand slowly clenched into a fist. He could not even remember when exactly Annette's headaches had begun. Or rather, perhaps he had been deliberately ignoring them all along. My wife has been taking some medication regularly. Check it, and if there is something more suitable, then switch her to that. At night, Annette woke up. A tall figure stood quietly beside her bed. It was Heiner, but his expression was completely different from usual. Right after that, Heiner called the doctor over. After listening to a long explanation, she finally learned the fact that she had miscarried. Although she had indeed been in poor condition during this period, she had always thought she was just being overly sensitive and had never imagined that it was pregnancy. Thinking of that child she had never even met, disappearing just like that without her knowing anything at all, a huge sense of loss welled up in Annette's heart. I have already kept your miscarriage confidential from the public, so you don't need to worry. The culprit has already been arrested, and the investigation is still ongoing. Afterward, he will most likely be punished for attempted murder. Annette did not care about any of that at all. She spoke in a hoarse voice. The child. How many weeks along was it? When she heard that it was 11 weeks, she closed her eyes in pain. So it was that night, 3 months ago, that had been the last time she had been intimate with Heiner. She had once so desperately hoped that Heiner would reject her directly, that he would not kiss her, nor hold her. Yet at the same time, she had hoped that Heiner would touch her. She had never given up any chance to reconcile, even if, in the end, she was still left behind in that room like cold leftovers. At this moment, Heiner's words pulled Annette back to reality. If you want a child, we can adopt one. Annette found it unbelievable. This was nothing like something Heiner would say. After coming back to herself, she immediately said that she did not need that. From the very beginning, you never planned to have a child with me. Thinking about it that way, not being born was actually a good thing. Otherwise, that child would only have met with misfortune. He would have lived in a loveless family, together with a mother of ill repute. So now that he is gone, don't you think that is actually a blessing in disguise? For a moment, Heiner did not know how to refute her. He explained that he had simply never considered children before. After all, the doctors had all said that it would be difficult for you to get pregnant, and there had been no sign of anything for these past 4 years. No matter how you think about it, this is a good thing for both you and Heiner. Would giving birth to an heir with me really help your political career? In his heart, Heiner had no choice but to admit it too. Whether for him or for the people who supported him, the miscarriage was a blessing amid misfortune. It was impossible for him to love a child born to a woman he despised. But in the end, wanting a child had been Annette's wish. After hearing this, Annette was full of confusion. So what? What does whether I want one or not have to do with you? What exactly are you trying to say? What I mean is, because you want a child, we can consider adoption. Hearing this, Annette suddenly shouted hysterically, I don't want one anymore. I don't need any child at all. I'm glad I didn't give birth to him. So why do you keep insisting on this? Her voice, almost a scream, made Heiner fall silent. In the room, only Annette's disordered breathing remained. In the end, Annette lay back down on the bed and told Heiner to leave. The chill coming from her abdomen made her entire body tremble uncontrollably. Only then did she realize that perhaps her past self had been too selfish. Just because she did not want to lose this relationship, she had desperately wanted to get pregnant. A child born that way was destined to face a cold and merciless world. She clearly knew that this child coming into the world would have been a mistake from the start, but she did not know why she still felt as though a huge hole had been torn open inside her. A few days later, after an examination, Annette was already close to full recovery. In addition, the doctor also discovered that the medication Annette had been taking was forbidden for pregnant women. When the medicine was prescribed, did you not tell the doctor that you might be pregnant? Your symptoms are actually very common for pregnant women. After hearing this, Annette had no reaction at all, because she felt that none of it mattered anymore. After Heiner brought Annette back to the ward, he suddenly broke the silence. Do you want to change doctors? Annette felt there was no need, but Heiner suppressed his anger and said, that doctor examined you so many times and still never realized that you were pregnant. His reaction only made Annette's head hurt more. Why do you care about this? But if you want to change, then change. Anyway, everything was always done according to your wishes from the beginning. Heiner's attempt at comfort only made Annette let out a cold laugh. She no longer wanted to be disappointed again. Now, she only wanted to leave the hospital as soon as possible. Helplessly, Heiner turned around and went to handle the discharge procedures. Suddenly, his gaze fell on Annette's hand. Where is your ring? Only then did Annette raise her hand and glance at it, but she was already too tired to explain now. I took it off because wearing it no longer has any meaning. Heiner said nothing, only turned and left the room. Outside the hospital, Without anyone noticing, a crowd had already gathered. Although Heiner had warned them in advance not to leak the news, the newspapers still published the entire course of the incident in detail. Annette's numb gaze slowly swept across the crowd. Yet when her personal safety was threatened, he once again stepped forward. Before going out, Heiner told her not to answer any questions from the reporters. The moment the doors opened, countless flashes burst through the curtain of rain. A barrage of sharp questions came crashing down like a curse. Annette's hand became stiff with fear. At this moment, she desperately wished for a pair of large hands to shield her, but that was clearly only an unrealistic wish. And just then, a voice cut through the chaotic crowd and reached Annette's ears clearly. Following the direction of the voice, Annette saw that person desperately pushing through the packed mass of reporters. Her voice was full of despair and panic. "There is something I must tell Mrs. Waldemar, no matter what," she shouted with all her strength, saying that she was the sister of the suspect, David Burkle. After learning the woman's identity, all that remained in Annette's heart was confusion. She did not know why the other party would appear here at such a time. The surrounding reporters instantly erupted at the news, all pointing their cameras and notebooks at that woman. But that woman's gaze remained fixed on Annette the entire time. "I don't want to be interviewed. I only want to speak with Madame alone." As soon as he realized something was wrong, Heiner immediately ordered his men to disperse the crowd, and he escorted Annette toward the car. "Madam, I'll wait for you to contact me." After leaving behind those final words, that woman was swallowed by the tide of reporters. On the way back to the residence, Annette's mind was filled with that woman's face. She always felt as if she had seen her somewhere before, but that memory was far too vague. She could not remember when exactly she had seen her, nor could she recall the other party's name, let alone know whether something had once happened that had made her forget her. Annette could not remember anything. She even began to suspect that there was something wrong with her memory. Just as Annette's thoughts were in turmoil, Heiner spoke. "That person probably just wants us to handle her brother's matter properly. There's no need to think too much about it." But instinctively, Annette felt that things were not that simple. Otherwise, why would she have said something like, "I can't reach you"? It turned out that the other party had previously sent several letters to Annette. But Heiner felt there was no need to show Annette letters sent by the killer's sister. Annette did not believe his excuse, because in this kind of matter, Heiner was already a repeat offender. She wanted to meet that woman and have a proper talk. As for the letters, since that had already passed, it no longer mattered much. "Then if I stay like this forever in the future, would that also be fine?" Hearing this, Annette turned her head in confusion. Why did this man think there would still be a future between them? Or rather, what exactly was the future he was talking about? But no matter what, she did not care. "Help me look into her contact information." Heiner nodded and did not object. "I will arrange for people to protect you." A few days later, Annette received that woman's information. Her name was Katrin. She had only been married for 6 months, lived on West Road with her husband, and made a living selling fruit. But even knowing this, Annette still could not remember who she was. A person like that, logically speaking, could not possibly have any goodwill toward her. Annette hesitated over whether she should take the initiative to contact the other party. Just then, laughter coming from outside the window drew Annette's attention. It was Heiner and Annalie. Seeing Annalie carrying a heavy briefcase, Heiner took the initiative to help her with it. Annette watched the two of them calmly. She was not familiar with the emotion of jealousy. Heiner had once said that he had already rejected this marriage arrangement, and she had always thought that Heiner would not joke about such a matter. Thinking of this, Annette suddenly let out a self-mocking smile. Perhaps she had never known what Heiner was really like. When Annette looked out the window once again, Heiner just happened to turn his head and looked toward her. But very quickly, he withdrew his gaze again and continued walking side by side with Annalie along the avenue. The breeze carried Annalie's laughter and drifted softly into Annette's room. When Heiner turned back again, Annette's window had already been shut tightly. At that moment, Annette finally made up her mind and dialed Katrin's home phone number. The person who answered was her husband. "Please pass a message to Mrs. Grote for me and say that she may come to my home to see me anytime." Annette waited until the other party hung up before slowly putting down the receiver. She thought about it for a long time, and in the end still felt that she had to hear what Katrin had to say. She wanted to know from the other woman what exactly had happened. But perhaps this was also the first time, or perhaps the last time, that she could have a chance to forget the past. The next day, Heiner brought the newly hired doctor to Annette's room. The two introduced themselves first, and when Annette said her own name, she paused slightly. She did not know whether, after her name now, she should still add Heiner's surname. The new doctor was named Mira, and she had already gained a general understanding of Annette's condition. She suggested that Annette receive psychological counseling, but Annette refused. In a sense, she really was already close to going mad. Whenever pressure and suffocation closed in on her, she always felt as though her consciousness was drifting back and forth on the edge between dream and reality. Mira could see Annette's unwillingness, so she placed the questionnaire on the table and then left the room. Heiner questioned Annette about why she was unwilling to accept psychological counseling. He had originally thought that Annette simply refused to believe in such things because of old aristocratic ideas. Even if there really was a problem, it could still be treated early. After hearing this, however, Annette suddenly laughed. "Have you forgotten that you once said you wanted to send me to a mental hospital? That was only because you kept resisting." At this, Annette cut him off directly. "In your eyes, is my asking for a divorce considered resistance? Please stop treating me like a servant. I have never thought that way. On the contrary, aren't you the one who has always seen me that way?" Annette's face was full of confusion. "When have I ever done such a thing?" In response, Heiner only wiped his face wearily and refused to continue speaking. Their conversations always ended this inexplicably. Conversation was supposed to be an attempt to repair their relationship, but Heiner's attitude made it impossible for Annette to see any future at all. A few days later, Katrin came to the residence. The moment she saw Annette, she immediately stood up. The two of them each gave a slight bow. Then the air fell into a brief silence. After sitting down, Katrin first asked how Annette's recovery was going. "It's much better already." The moment she finished speaking, Annette noticed Katrin's slightly swollen belly. When she heard that the pregnancy was already 5 months along, Annette was so agitated that even both her hands were trembling. "Because of your brother, I lost my child. While your child can be born amid everyone's blessings. But my child did not even receive a single blessing. No one even knew he had ever existed." Annette wanted very much to say all these thoughts aloud, but she also understood that even if she did, it would probably have no meaning at all. At this moment, Katrin suddenly smiled. "Madam is not quite as I imagined. I had originally thought you would be more arrogant and more self-righteous. After all, you are the only daughter of Marquis Dietrich." As for Katrin's family, there were 3 siblings. After her elder brother graduated, he entered a trading company to work. Every day, he worked desperately hard, currying favor with his superiors, wanting to climb step by step to a higher position. But later, the branch chief, who was an aristocrat, took away her brother's achievements. Not only that, he then promoted his own son as well. So her brother joined the Revolutionary Army, although that name sounded grand and righteous. But most people, like her brother, were merely insignificant ordinary people. They stepped forward not for some great ideal. The moment she heard the words Revolutionary Army, Annette felt her breathing tighten. She did not want to listen, yet she had no choice but to. 5 years ago, it was exactly the time of the large-scale purge of the Revolutionary Army. Many people were taken away, and Katrin's brother was one of them. The aristocrat said that her brother was an imperial spy who had caused the civil unrest in Padania, and the person responsible for interrogating him was none other than Marquis Dietrich. Rather than an interrogation, it would be more accurate to call it torture. Her brother was soon sentenced to death. Afterward, the Marquis hurried off elsewhere, and that day happened to be Madame's piano recital. At that very moment, Annette finally remembered where she had seen Katrin before. Her face turned pale as she covered her mouth. That day, Annette had just finished an enormously successful solo recital. Under the dazzling lights, she held a huge bouquet of flowers and basked in everyone's praise. At that time, her mother said they should take a photo as a keepsake, but her father stood to one side, speaking with his subordinates in a low voice. Annette vaguely heard words like "get rid of him." After the family finished taking the photo, Annette asked her father what exactly had happened. The other party merely said vaguely that some fool had refused to accept the verdict and caused a disturbance. After hearing that, Annette nodded. In her eyes, criminals were always like that, stubbornly refusing to confess no matter what. After the performance, Annette went to the window to get some air. Just then, a voice drew her attention. At the mansion gate, 2 guards were dragging a woman away. That person clung desperately to the railing and refused to leave. Annette guessed that this was probably the disturbance her father had mentioned. But when Annette saw that woman's face, filled with anger, regret, and despair from struggling, she involuntarily stepped back half a step. For some reason, a terrible unease wrapped around her body. It was as if, for the first time, she truly sensed what the lower classes were. Just then, Ansgar appeared behind her and interrupted her. When Annette looked toward the gate again, the scene outside had already returned to calm, and the next day, Katrin's brother was executed. At this moment, the woman in Annette's memory overlapped with the expressionless face before her. Later, when Katrin heard that the royal family had fallen, she had once hoped that Dietrich's apology would eventually come. But not long afterward, the newspapers carried news of his death. Just like that, before they ever received even a single apology, everything was over. Hearing this, Annette only felt her mind buzzing. Katrin had not come here to discuss how to deal with her younger brother's matter. What he did to Madame was terrible, and he ought to be punished. She came here only because she wanted Annette to know what had once happened and to know how her brother had really died. I do not know whether ignorance counts as a sin, but I do not mean to blame Madame. Regarding this incident, I feel deeply sorry, and I also hope that both your body and mind recover as soon as possible. After saying that, Katrin prepared to leave. In Annette's mind, all that remained was the sound of Katrin's heels striking the floor, along with the sound of her father desperately urging her to run away. Just as Katrin was about to turn the doorknob, she heard Annette's incoherent apology. Her murmurs gradually turned into sobs, and tears kept falling onto her tightly clasped hands. Annette repeated her apology over and over. She did not know what else she could do. Katrin turned to look at Annette. The sorrow of the past surfaced once again on her face, but the apology she truly wanted to hear belonged to someone else. In the past, Annette had never thought of trying to understand them. She had never believed that her life would ever intersect with theirs. But on the day of that piano recital, their lives intersected. An aristocrat who inherited royal blood and commoners. A person who dreamed of becoming a pianist, and a person who made a living selling fruit. The family member of a military commander who had captured and executed revolutionaries. Even if she pieced together all of these shattered fragments of the past one by one, Annette still could not truly understand their lives. But now, she was willing to face the past and examine herself. Perhaps then, she could understand them just a little more. But when she finally realized this, she discovered that she could never return to the past. Afterward, she wrote a letter of forgiveness for Katrin's younger brother. When Heiner saw it, he was very puzzled and asked Annette what exactly she had said with the other party. Or are you trying to be a saint? Hearing this, Annette smiled faintly. How could she possibly be a saint? But issuing a letter of forgiveness was her right, and also her choice. Suddenly, she noticed Heiner's gaze. It feels like I haven't seen you smile like that in a very long time. The air froze in an instant. The next second, the smile vanished completely from Annette's face. She met Heiner's gaze. I'm sorry, Heiner. For everything that happened in the past, including the things I did not know about, I apologize to you. Annette spoke very calmly and very sincerely, but Heiner only let out a cold laugh. Do you know what exactly you should be apologizing for? Annette did not answer, nor did she know how to answer. She knew that Heiner resented her, but whether that resentment came from her family or from something deeper that she knew nothing about, she had no way of knowing. Seeing Annette remain silent, Heiner laughed mockingly. Don't ever apologize to me for the rest of your life. That would be better instead. After returning to her room, Annette fell into deep thought while filling the bathtub with water. Perhaps her birth itself had been a kind of mistake. A mistaken birth had created the mistaken life she now lived. She could not remain forever ignorantly covering her own eyes and ears in order to preserve so-called innocence. People often only realize after walking down one road for a very long time that it was never the road they truly wanted to take. Perhaps Heiner was the same. He refused to divorce because he still wanted revenge. He wanted to drag Annette down with him to be swallowed by misfortune, sustaining this twisted life. And now he had succeeded. Annette was already tired. She took out the dagger and slowly lowered her body into the bathtub. Heiner had said that she should not think about anything, but that was simply unrealistic. If her life was destined to keep hurting others, then perhaps giving up such a life was the correct choice. On the day she went to see Katrin, Heiner had given her a dagger for self-defense. The dagger gleamed with a cold light. Annette always felt that it was somewhat similar to Heiner's temperament. With trembling hands, she raised the dagger and aimed it at her wrist. She was very afraid, yet she did not hesitate. At this final moment, Annette instead smiled with relief. Congratulations, Heiner. Your revenge has succeeded. Meanwhile, Heiner was biting on an unlit cigar as he flipped through the letter of understanding Annette had written. The messy, almost illegible handwriting made his brows sink involuntarily. He reached out and pulled open the lower drawer, which was stuffed with letters Annette had written to him in the past. After comparing them, he realized that the handwriting was indeed completely different, and then he picked up one of the old letters again. As Heiner read, he suddenly smiled. The letter was filled with Annette's trivial daily life, yet his gaze remained fixed on every single word. When he saw the sentence at the end of the letter, I like you, Heiner's whole body trembled. After that, he could not help but read through several more letters, all of them filled with fragments of happiness he had once deliberately hidden away. Although in the end, all of it was nothing more than a lie, those had still been the happiest moments of his life. Back then, he had even fantasized that the future would never come. I'm sorry. Annette's apology suddenly struck him with crushing force. She had never been a woman who was good at apologizing. Even in the past, no matter how badly they quarreled, Annette would only write him a letter afterward. Then, he thought of the sleeping pills she had been stockpiling for months. The crooked, unbearably ugly embroidery, and the sight of her absent-mindedly walking toward Fanda High. Exactly when had she become so unfamiliar? At that moment, a violent sense of foreboding suddenly struck him. He had never wanted to believe it, yet an unfounded terror rose in his heart. Heiner knocked on Annette's door, desperately hoping to hear the faint response he was used to. If that happened, he could turn around and leave, and go on mercilessly mocking that woman. But the room was empty, and the silence was chilling. In the end, he irritably pushed open the bathroom door. What he saw inside instantly froze Heiner where he stood. The scent of roses, wrapped in the smell of blood, rushed violently into his brain. Heiner tried to call Annette's name, but no sound would come out. That pale face viciously assaulted Heiner's nerves. He lifted Annette out of the bathtub and ordered the maid to fetch a doctor at once. Afterward, Heiner laid Annette on the bed. His trembling hands soaked a handkerchief with water. Then he wrapped the wet handkerchief around Annette's wound, and the blood instantly dyed it red. Heiner was so terrified that he began muttering under his breath. Just then, the doctor arrived in the room. "Save her quickly," Heiner shouted anxiously at the doctor. It sounded like a threat, yet even more like the plea of someone driven into a corner. While the doctor was giving emergency treatment, Heiner stood motionless, not far away. He would not allow Annette to die like this. He wanted her to experience the same despair he had endured. In the next moment, Heiner's thoughts returned to Rosenberg's rose garden. In Annette's memory, that was the scene of their first meeting. But long before that, Heiner had already met her once. Her fingers rose and fell across the piano keys, and the gentle melody drifted softly with the breeze. This was a memory Heiner could never erase. Suddenly, the piano music came to an abrupt stop, and Annette's gaze, like a judgment, jolted Heiner awake from the dream. For the next few days, Annette never woke up. Heiner sat by the bedside, burdened with troubled thoughts. Those tired dark gray eyes remained fixed on the woman in bed. He was afraid Annette would remain asleep forever like this. Although he knew that sitting there was useless, his body refused to obey his reason. He had also asked the doctor for the reason. It might be aftereffects from the gunshot wound, or it might be depression. But the most important thing was whether the patient herself had the will to wake up. Heiner hoarsely murmured Annette's name. He still could not accept it. How could someone so timid, fragile, and afraid of everything do something like this? Isn't this what you wanted? A faint voice sounded by Heiner's ear. For Annette, living is more terrifying than dying. Hadn't you long wished for her to disappear from this world? Isn't all of this exactly what you wanted? Heiner was rendered speechless by the voice deep inside himself. This was not what he wanted. At the very least, he did not want Annette to leave him like this. But as for what he actually wanted, even he himself did not know. The next day, news of Annette's failed suicide made the front page headlines. People generally believed it was just an act she had staged to win sympathy. Reporters had already crowded the entrance of the estate early in the morning. Heiner's cold gaze swept across the crowd. He had always been a leader of the masses, but at this moment, he almost wanted to shoot every one of them dead on the spot. Just then, the butler cautiously came to report that one of Madame's visitors had arrived, and that if he could not see Madame, he insisted on seeing the commander. When he heard that it was Ansgar, Heiner immediately felt a headache coming on. This was the last person he wanted to see right now. But when he thought of Annette, he still decided to hear what the other man had to say. The moment they met, Ansgar furiously grabbed Heiner by the collar. "Now that you've driven Annette to this point, are you satisfied? Is trampling on nobles really that entertaining to you?" Heiner easily shoved Ansgar away, then straightened his collar. "You want to take Annette to France? Do you think I would hand her over to a place where monarchist restoration forces still exist?" Heiner knew very well why those people wanted Annette. Because among the surviving nobles, she was the highest-ranking heir of royal blood, and she was still young, capable of continuing the royal line. But they did not know that Annette had already lost her ability to bear children. In other words, she no longer had the value the restorationists wanted. "There is no way I will hand Annette over to you." Ansgar could hardly believe it. "Just how much more misery do you want Annette to suffer?" Heiner could not answer because even he himself did not know the answer. "I will help Annette file for divorce. You drove your wife to attempt suicide. That charge alone is already enough. Once the divorce is granted and she goes to France, you will have no right to interfere. If you want to disgrace yourself abroad, then go ahead and try." Just as Ansgar was about to leave, Heiner stopped him. "Do you still love her?" Ansgar frowned slightly, not understanding what Heiner meant by that. He tried to make out the expression on Heiner's face, but that face was still shrouded in shadow. "I've been wondering, if she went to France with you, would she actually be happier?" At that moment, the light in the room dimmed slightly, and only then did Ansgar finally see Heiner's expression clearly. At the very least, it would not be as unfortunate as death. Looking at his wife's deathly pale face, Heiner began to doubt himself for the first time. Restless and uneasy, he walked into Annette's room. At this time, his wife had already been moved to the annex to recuperate. The room was the same as always, as if nothing had happened, except that it lacked the familiar scent that belonged to Annette. He pulled open the desk drawer and found a cloth bag with something inside. At first, Heiner thought it contained gemstones, but to his surprise, it was filled with the seashells they had picked up at the seaside last time. Yet he clearly remembered that he had already thrown this trash away at the time. He could not understand why she had picked this trash up again. "Even if I die, my husband will not have any reaction at all." Annette's words, and the sight of her back as she walked toward the sea, filled Heiner with intense unease. He abruptly stood up and began searching through Annette's room. There was a safe in the wardrobe. Inside were Annette's jewelry box and the donation accounts of the Padania Citizens Association. The documents had been sorted neatly by Annette, but by all rights, she had already been removed from it after the revolution. Whether it was these seashells or these documents, Heiner could not understand why Annette had done such meaningless things until he opened the jewelry box, and what was inside made him forget how to breathe for an instant. It was his and Annette's wedding rings. Heiner trembled as he picked up the ring. At that moment, he finally understood that everything Annette had done had been preparation for her own death. Heiner stared blankly at Annette on the bed. No matter how deep the hatred in his heart was, he had never once taken off this wedding ring. Heiner wanted to put the ring back on Annette, but when he thought of Annette saying that there was no point in wearing it any longer, he finally gave up. Heiner looked at Annette's face, and the past surged over him like a tide. You are still as innocent as before. Even if you choose death, it cannot wash away your sins. There is still too much unresolved between us. I should go on hating you and go on taking revenge on you. He clearly wanted to say that, but when the words reached his lips, they instead became, let's go to Grand Fort together. Since you want to see the sea, I will take you to see it. I will allow you to go anywhere you want and do anything you want to do. So stay by my side. Heiner reached out, wanting to touch Annette's cheek, but his hand stopped in midair, and in the end he hesitated and withdrew it. On the fourth day, Annette woke up. Heiner, who had been keeping watch at the bedside, noticed her slightest reaction at once. Can you hear me, Annette? But the instant she saw clearly who was in front of her, an indescribable despair instantly swept through Annette's whole body. Her breathing gradually became rapid, and her shoulders and hands began to tremble lightly. Fortunately, the doctor arrived in the room just in time. While examining Annette's condition, Heiner could do nothing. He could only stand there blankly at the side and watch. Madam needs rest right now. Commander, it would be best if you leave first. Heiner nodded. After leaving the room, he collapsed onto the floor as if all strength had left him. After he left, Annette kept her eyes tightly shut, but still could not stop the tears of sorrow. Heiner had thought Annette would regret it. After all, she was not used to suffering and had always hated pain. But from her eyes, Heiner saw her despair at having survived. Heiner wanted to have a proper talk with Annette, but what could he even say? To continue as before, pushing Annette step by step into the abyss? In the room, Annette was full of confusion. Why was she still alive? Was it because she had always been pampered, so that she could not even bring herself to truly harm herself? It would have been enough to just leave her alone, so why save her? These questions lingered in Annette's mind and would not go away. She wanted to be alone for a while, so she hoped the nurse could leave first. The nurse looked troubled, because that was not something she could decide. Just as the nurse was about to go out and explain the situation, the noise inside the room had already caught Heiner's attention. What happened? The moment she heard that familiar, deep voice, Annette immediately felt a headache coming on. After hesitating for a moment, Heiner still sat down by Annette's bed. Your condition is still unstable. If I leave you alone, I do not know what might happen. Annette asked in return. Was it you who saved me? Hearing Heiner admit it, Annette was full of confusion. Why did you save me? I already went, as you wished, toward an unfortunate death. This was clearly the ending both you and I wanted, yet you destroyed it with your own hands. What did I destroy? Was I supposed to just stand by and watch you die? That was exactly what you should have done. Or are you saying you never imagined things would come to this point? You want me to be unhappy forever, yet you do not want me to die. You have never treated me as a person. That way of thinking is even worse than my wanting to kill myself, Heiner. Heiner opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but his breathing was already trembling violently. After several difficult attempts in the end, he finally managed to say only one sentence. I just didn't want you to die. The next day, after Annette regained consciousness, she was sent back to her own room. During this period, Ansgar had been trying to find a way to get in touch with her. Annette looked expressionlessly at the note. She did not dislike Ansgar, but everything between them had already changed long ago, and there was no way back to the way things had been. So leaving that beautiful memory in the past was better for both of them. Just then, Ansgar's voice came from outside the door. Because it was inconvenient for Annette to go to the drawing room, the two of them could only talk in her room. After exchanging a few simple greetings, they could no longer find anything else to talk about. You can tell me about your pain. But Annette felt that this was not something she could say to a friend, so she apologized to Ansgar. In fact, ever since seeing Ansgar again, Annette had never truly regarded him as a friend she could trust. She felt that Ansgar had come to find her only for power, for the restoration of the monarchy. But she could give him none of those things, because Annette had already lost the ability to bear children and could no longer continue the royal bloodline. After hearing this, Ansgar was both shocked and bewildered. Indeed, just as Annette said, he had come to Padania to find her because of political necessity, but that was not the main reason. Even if she could not bear children, he still would not abandon Annette, because even now, I still love you. Ansgar's feelings for Annette had begun even earlier than Heiner's, but Annette was not moved in the slightest. She felt that Ansgar's love for her was built upon the status and power that had long since ceased to exist. And as for those things, she no longer had any of them now. Ansgar wanted to explain further, but Annette interrupted him. Do you want to marry me? Ansgar paused for a moment, then spoke again with the same gentle smile. Your divorce has not been settled yet. We can think about it slowly, so for now, come with me to France first. From that response alone, Annette had already heard the real answer. She gazed at Ansgar quietly. The relationship between them could never return to the way it used to be, when they could laugh and fool around together. Not long ago, Ansgar had just finished talking with Annette. Just as he was about to leave the estate, Heiner's low warning came from behind him. Don't come see her again. What right do you have to refuse on Annette's behalf? I have that right as her husband. Ansgar let out a scoff. After the divorce, I'd like to see what else you'll be able to say. Going to France is far better than staying by your side and rotting away bit by bit. At that moment, Heiner still believed he had everything under control. He warned Ansgar not to fantasize about using Annette to restore the monarchy because she was no longer able to bear children. Ansgar deliberately put on a look as if he had known all along. Compared with a husband like you, who is worse than a stranger, I understand Annette better. Trying to drive a wedge between us with something like that is truly ridiculous. Unexpectedly, the moment Heiner heard that, he flew into a rage and abruptly stepped toward Ansgar. In these past 3 years, how many times have you seen her? Even if Annette agreed to go with you, so what? You could never possibly win against me. And Annette can never leave me either. His low voice carried a faint but unmistakable threat of death, sending a chill down Ansgar's spine. As he watched Heiner's retreating figure, the pressure weighing on him slowly began to ease. Suddenly, the words Heiner had spoken a few days earlier echoed in his ears once again. They sounded more like something Heiner was repeating over and over to warn himself, almost as if he were brainwashing himself. Otherwise, why had he worn the expression of a loser back then? That night, Annette curled up on the bed. With her eyes closed, countless chaotic thoughts flashed through her mind. Ansgar's hesitation had already proven that what he said was obviously a lie. It was not that Annette could not understand. After all, there was no benefit at all in marrying a woman who had nothing. For the current Annette, perhaps even becoming Ansgar's lover was an unattainable dream. At that moment, Heiner walked into the room. Let's go take a walk in the garden. It's not good to stay cooped up in the room all the time. After hearing this, Annette slowly rose from the bed. When Heiner wrapped a scarf around Annette, he accidentally met her eyes. It's very cold outside. Annette did not reply. Without a single word between them, they walked through the garden like that, the cold winter wind blowing dead leaves in all directions. Heiner noticed Annette's shoulders trembling slightly, so he asked in a low voice whether she was cold. As he spoke, he handed her his gloves. Annette silently accepted them, because even if she refused, Heiner would still force them into her hands. After that, Heiner asked Annette whether there was anywhere she wanted to go. Heiner said a great many things. Those plans seemed like a desperate attempt to prove that she still held a place in his heart. But Annette no longer cared. She slowly let out a breath and replied with only a single word. Okay. Hearing that, a spark finally lit up in Heiner's eyes. But just when he thought he could finally feel even a little relieved, the next day, he discovered a comb sharpened to an extreme edge. Because of this, he specifically invited a psychologist. Every day, Heiner would go into the room and talk to Annette. Although she spoke less and less, she still gave some responses most of the time. Moreover, she no longer brought up divorce, nor did she complain anymore. But Heiner felt every second that danger was drawing closer. He often woke from his sleep drenched in cold sweat. It was like walking across a shallow lake covered in ice. Only after personally confirming Annette's condition could he barely breathe a sigh of relief. Before he knew it, it was already the end of the year, and Heiner bought a purple gemstone brooch at a luxury store. This was the first year-end gift he had prepared for Annette in 3 years. On the way home, snow began to fall from the sky. Annette liked snow very much. She liked all the romantic things in this world. Heiner thought Annette would surely like this gift, so he planned to invite her out for a walk. But when he knocked on the door, there was no response at all. Logically, the nurse should have come to open it. He tried to open the door, only to find that it had been locked from the inside. Just then, a nurse came over carrying hot water. Heiner instantly realized that something was wrong. He almost did not hesitate and slammed his shoulder hard into the door. The moment the door burst open, Heiner's pupils suddenly contracted. Annette's body was struggling painfully in midair. Heiner immediately pulled out a dagger from his coat and cut the rope for Annette. At the very moment Annette fell, Heiner caught her in his arms. Annette's ragged gasps made Heiner's mind roar. In a hoarse voice, he demanded to know what exactly she was doing. Tears slid down Annette's pale cheeks. She did not answer, only collapsed helplessly onto the floor. Heiner held her tightly, no longer knowing what else he could do. He could only beg Annette again and again not to do this anymore. Then, through those suppressed sobs that were almost suffocating, a tiny voice could be heard. I don't want to live anymore. Only at this moment did Heiner finally realize that Annette could decide life and death for herself at any time. The red cord she had used to hang herself was the very same one that had once been used to bind letters together. At the thought that Annette might leave him forever, a dangerous thought unexpectedly arose in Heiner's heart. Wouldn't it be better to imprison Annette? That way, he could watch her from every possible angle. But such a method could at most imprison only her body and would only leave her even more broken. Heiner felt that he had probably already gone mad. He softly called Annette's name. What am I supposed to do? Divorce you? If you want to go to France with Ansgar, then go. Whatever you want to do, I'll agree to it. I only beg you not to kill yourself again. Promise me that as long as we divorce, you will keep living, all right? Heiner was so desperate that even his dignity was nearly gone, but none of that mattered to him anymore. At last, he saw Annette nod through tears and agree. The next day, Annette went to handle the divorce procedures, and the lawyer explained all kinds of property disputes to her. But Annette seemed as if she had heard nothing at all. After signing her name on the agreement, the lawyer stopped her. Your ex-husband said that if you are willing, you may continue staying at the estate. Annette shook her head expressionlessly. She wanted to leave immediately. Heiner was standing right at the main gate. Won't you stay a few more days? Annette did not answer. Then, Heiner placed something into her hand. It was Ansgar's card, along with a brooch. Do whatever you want, but remember to keep your promise and stay alive. I hope you can have a warm year's end. Annette Rosenberg. Annette looked at Heiner and only briefly replied, okay. After leaving the estate, Annette walked farther and farther away, not even knowing where she should go. To be honest, Annette did not want to keep the promise she had made with Heiner. Before the divorce, she had already stopped caring about what Heiner thought. Now that they were divorced, they were no different from strangers. And no matter what, the days ahead would only be harder to endure than death. Annette looked at the brooch Heiner had given her, and a hollow sense of loss welled up in her heart. Just as she did not know what to do, a figure suddenly stepped in front of her. Heiner had been standing by the window the whole time, watching Annette leave. He still could not understand where exactly things had started to go wrong. At the very beginning, it was because of his love for Annette that Heiner chose to become the Marquis's blade. In order to get closer to Annette, he resorted to every means to climb to a higher position. But Annette was destined never to notice someone like him. Filthy, lowly, and with hands stained full of blood. Heiner placed all the blame on Annette, because Annette's seemingly happy life had originally been bought with their blood and sacrifice. Filthy and self-loathing emotions surged into Heiner's chest in an instant. Annette was the sole source of all the struggle in his heart, so why should she be allowed to know nothing? In her life, the hardest thing had been nothing more than practicing the piano well, while he could only struggle and roll about in the mire, giving his head and spilling his blood for her life. At that moment, the sound of a piano seemed to drift from afar, and Heiner curled up in the corner, sobbing soundlessly on his own.